Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and I have today with me a very bright and for me, he's a young man and a person who actually has a website called Ideas for India that is very interesting. So he's one of the brains behind Rethinking India. He has a couple of book series. His name is Pushparaj Deshpande. He has been to some of the most elite schools in the world. He studied in Doon School, then went to St. Stephen's, and then went on to Oxford University. And he has been an advisor to various members of the Indian Parliament. He is also profoundly involved in how India is at least trying to move India in the more progressive direction, if I'm not mistaken. So welcome to Conversations. I'm absolutely delighted to have you on the show.
Thank you, Professor Khan. It's a delight to be on your show, and we watch it in India with great interest, not just for the guests that you have, but also your unique insights. It helps us think, and it's very stimulating, your program. And we hope that it reaches as many people in India, both progressive and neutral. And you're able to shape your conversations are able to shape policy in the next few decades.
Well, thank you very much. Our point of departure is going to be an op-ed that you and Salman Khurshid wrote in the Hindu last week, which talks about essentially how India can potentially not only navigate the global transformation of the global economic order, but also you see this as an opportunity for India to push a global agenda which is progressive. So basically, I mean, it's just one article, but the amount of ideas you have literally stuffed into it is very interesting. And I would like to go through 3 or 4 of those issues that you raised. But the very idea that is breathtakingly, shall we say, ambitious to essentially try to imagine moving us from a neoliberal global order to essentially a neo-progressive order is perhaps what you are trying to achieve. So first of all, congratulations on that article. And then I want to let you speak directly to the audience and tell us as to what are the main elements that you see which are changing about the global order.
Thank you, Professor Khan. As we have argued in the article, and there is a series of articles that predates this article and will now follow also. We're looking at a great global transformation, to take from Karl Polanyi, and this transformation is going to profoundly change the world that we know, economically, politically, and of course socially. Given that you are in the States, obviously you're particularly focused on the Republican Party and particularly President Trump, what they are doing, his geoeconomic transactionalism. But it's also about China, and they're both locked into a great power conflict. In fact, the recent meetings that I've had, the G2 summit that they're christening themselves as, are basically reshaping global trade, financial currency markets, as well as geopolitics. Now, I want to quickly just run through 2, 3 key points. One is, of course, domestically. You've seen a resurgence of the right-wing political parties across the globe, and there is a certain similarity between them. Others have glancingly spoken about this. We have been engaged very deeply about this, but right-wing parties globally have been colluding. Your former NSA in the US, Steve Bannon, started something called the Movement. That has, of course, been followed by CPAC, the Conservative Forum, and so on and so forth, where they are sharing best practices. They are supporting each other. They're platforming younger politicos. They are funding each other. They're also talking about how they can shape policies together.
Yes.
So just so that our audience knows what is happening between the US and Argentina, right?
Yeah.
That is, of course, the starting point. That is the foundation, which is sort of laying paving the way for this great global disruption, and of course, eventually it will follow into a transaction. For a fact that economically, there is big tech has taken over the world. It is colluding with conservative and far right parties to shape how politics is determined. There is a swift banking system which has been weaponized. Tariffs, sanctions. I think 38 nations have been under sanctions by the US. 100 central banks are experimenting with digital currencies, which is going to profoundly change cross-border financial transactions. Not to mention also terrorism, political financing, so on and so forth. So that's the economic financial aspect. Then, of course, there is the political aspect. When I say political, I mean the geopolitical aspect. These countries are preparing for the next round of economic imperialism. President Trump wants to buy Greenland. He's been talking about, not now, but he's been talking about making Canada the 31st US 51st US state. Russia, China, India, US are all preparing for the melting of the Arctic, and preparing for a different kind of world order. They're trying to secure their trade routes, whether it's in Panama, Central Asia, Africa. They're fusing digital currency ecosystems into foreign policy, and a bunch of other things are having. Israel has been given a free hand to so-called manage West Asia, and I refuse to use Middle East because that's a colonial construct. They're pushing Europe to manage Russia. So this resurgence of primordial rules of statecraft is the second big shift that is being pushed through, that is being imposed through populist autocrats from the far right parties. I'll stop here and, of course, take it from what you say next.
So it's very interesting that you have identified some of the major structural changes that we are seeing in both global and domestic politics. And you'd also highlight the nexus between, shall we say, oligarchs and these right-wing populist leaders, which is basically undermining democracy in these countries. Wherever the right-wing parties are winning, we see that billionaires are basically determining policies, both domestic as well as foreign policy. So in all of these things, India should have been doing much better than it is, isn't it? Given the fact that India also has a right-wing president, prime minister, you have oligarchs, and they also share a similar ethnicity and come from the same linguistic background. So I'm wondering, that why isn't India doing as well as it should have, given the fact that it is basically showing all the symptoms that you have described, that it has the nexus between oligarchs and politics, democracy is being undermined, there's a right-wing resurgence going on. India too is looking towards de-dollarization, for example. India is also thinking in terms of imperialism because of this constant talk about Akhand Bharat. The fact that you have the Akhand Bharat map on India's new parliament building is a clear sign of imperial aspirations. So what is your assessment? Is India doing well, or is India not doing well, and should India be going in a different direction?
It's a very interesting and a very complex question, Professor Khan. I mean, not many people ask this, but I'm glad that you do, especially given a large part of your audience is diaspora Indians who are buying blindly into what is being proselytized from India. See, let's just dissect this one by one. I won't belabor the point too much. Prime Minister Modi aggressively tried to project this strongman image and, in a sense, undo and outmaneuver the large ghost of Prime Minister Nehru and Indira Gandhi. So his entire politics has been to project this Vishwaguru image that I am, best friends with these big leaders. And the bulk of, our current, once upon a time, he was a foreign secretary. Now he's a foreign minister. The external affairs minister, Dr. Jaishankar, very strongly advocated that you need to put all your eggs in the American basket, and you need to blindly depend on piggyback on America, which sees us as a democratic counter to China. We must capitalize on this particular imperative within the US. and try to maximize our gains, and of course use this to maximize your political interest, which is to pander to his core base that boss, I'm the Vishwaguru of global politics. That has gone completely for a toss because President Trump and in fact the Democratic Party, unfortunately, there is a bipartisan consensus on the fact that India is no longer being able to be a democratic counter to China. And this is a very difficult thing for progressives to also understand. But the democratic parties, the so called progressives of this world, are also no longer willing to see India as it once was. When Dr. Manmohan Singh demitted office, India, look at any of these magazines, The Economist, Time, we were being compared to China, not just in terms of politics, but also in terms of economics. The question was whether we are going to catch up. Today, in terms of all human development indicators, in terms of economic indicators, we are being compared to Pakistan, to African countries. And I'm not saying this, I'm saying this with great sorrow because as patriots, we did want India to outstrip China. Now the thing is that given this development, what has happened is that the prime minister and his myopic foreign policy is stuck between whether to continue projecting himself as this great friend of populist autocrats who are no longer willing to help him simply because they are no longer seeing him as a democratic as a genuine counter to Chinese aspirations and clearly counter hegemonic growth. So what is happening is that is one imperative. The other imperative is let us ally ourselves to China and Russia. So this confused foreign policy has ironically brought him back exactly to what he was critiquing in 2014, non-alignment. He kept, now they've of course rechristened it as multi-alignment so that it's not, they don't have to tell their core base that we are back to what the Nehruvian foreign policy consensus was. But 10 years we have, this is a decade of this is a wasted decade in terms of foreign policy, because India, given its unique vantage point economically, politically, culturally, socially, you know for a fact that we are not just a developing country in the BRICS countries, we're the top five, one of the top 5 6 economies, but we also have a lot of moral capital. We were one of the first peoples who stood for Palestine. We were one of the first people who stood for South Africa against apartheid. We were the first people who stood for peace between North and South Korea. This I know for a fact because I've dealt with a number of progressive parties and political leaders globally. They see this as a unique capital that only India can bring to bear. This has all been frittered away, right? We should have been the natural leaders of the global South. And we could have said that, boss, and this is something, this is the last point I'll make and I'll stop. This is something we could have easily made that, you know what, President Trump is dismantling the world order. It does not work for the Europeans. It does not work for the so-called West, quote unquote. But you know what? It's actually a crisis in this. There's an opportunity in this crisis. The neoliberal global order does not work for us. We do not have a fair voice in either multilateral institutions or a fair vote in them. There are structural adjustments, not just linked to India, but also many African, some South American parties, governments, nations. And this was an opportunity for us to say, let's build a large coalition to force these nations to think of an alternative paradigm that works equitably for all nations. Why did we miss the boat? Because Prime Minister Modi, the BJP government, was more interested in hugging global leaders and telling them, you know what, we're willing to do whatever it takes for you. This FTA, for example, with the UK that we have signed, what have we got out of that? What has India got? Honestly, ask ourselves. Similarly, the tariffs that similarly that the reduction in cotton tariffs that we have allowed the US, it is going to hit our cotton farmers so badly. At one point, we stood up against RCEP, the regional cooperation, the economic partnership, because it would have impacted our farmers and our animal husbandry industry. The Modi government thankfully carried it forward. Do we have the guts? Have we been standing up against them today? When they have told us to walk, we have been bent our knees when it comes to importing oil from Russia. So what I'm trying to say is that there are many complex political failures that have transpired only because Prime Minister Modi and the BJP government were looking at foreign policy from a purely ideological lens.
True. You know, I spent a lot of time traveling through Middle East. I've been to Turkey more than a dozen times, and Egypt and other places. And every time my first encounter with anybody prominent, they would literally stand up and meet with me because I'm from Hindustan without knowing who I am. They said, "Oh, I remember a Turkish very prominent Sufi scholar who had he pulled me from a crowd of few thousand people and brought me to the center of the stage, saying this man is from Hindustan." So there is still a lot of respect and goodwill for India. But it's one thing that I have noticed, and in your article, you also talk about how India can partner with the global South to essentially create a more fairer governance system in terms of multilateral organizations. And this is something that even Dr. Jaishankar has been talking about, reform of multilateral. But one thing that I notice about Prime Minister Modi, I say this jokingly to my students that he's like the labor union leader who is always in the country club. He's always playing golf, or he's having lunch, or he's having these champagne dinners with the capitalists. While he claims to be the leader of the global South, he's always at G7 or G20. He's always 11 trips to the United States is what he's made. And I'm very disappointed that there's nothing more global South than Gaza today. And India has clearly voted consistently with the global North, has even provided weapons to Israel. So how does the global South take India as a credible representative and leader of the global South, given that India is not, for example, part of the ICJ case on Gaza? There was a meeting if you remember, in Colombia about the global South's response to the war in the Middle East. India was not there. Even in BRICS and SCO, it appears that India is more interested in diluting the agenda than strengthening it. I asked one of my students to play India's prime minister in a simulation on BRICS. And I remember he came to me and said, "So, Dr. Khan, you just want me to act as if I'm America's agent in BRICS, right?" That was how he interpreted India's role in BRICS. So given that our foreign policy has sort of raised the stature of Modi at home, but I think diminished India's stature abroad, especially in the global South, do you think it is something that can be recovered?
That's again a very good question, Professor Khan. Let me be categorical, because what we're going to say here is going to be caricatured by the right.
Sure.
The global South and the global North are desperate to partner with India. No one sees India. India is inevitable. It is unavoidable. Their problem is with the BJP government and with Prime Minister Modi. They don't see them as reliable partners anymore, simply because there is no foreign policy vision. They don't fit in with the so-called West camp. They don't fit with China's camp, Russia's camp, and they don't have an alternative vision to offer for India. This is the problem. It is not India. India continues to be relevant because our manifest destiny, it is inevitable. Whether you like it or not, very soon India, China, India, China, Brazil, and South Africa are going to be as big of a block as the US was once upon a time, and we are going to outstrip we are as a global South, as a collective, we are going to outstrip the US by 2040. Most likely India will be in the top 3 by then.
Yeah.
Now the problem is, so the thing is that everyone wants to work with India because we are a huge market. We are also a democratic, unlike China, we are a democratic country. We are fairly progressive. We are English speaking. We are someone who are worth betting on. But do you think that Prime Minister Modi and BJP stands for any of this? And let me give you some concrete examples. Now, I know for a fact that in the US, for example, there has been a concerted attack on universities. All right-wing, all populist autocrats are doing this.
Yeah.
What is China doing? China is lapping them up. What was stopping India from asking them to come to Delhi University or Jawaharlal Nehru University or South Asia University or Pune University or Bombay University? There was a time when Prime Minister Nehru spent resources. Our school education, higher education systems were palaces. These were the temples of modern India. What have these guys done? They have done the exact same thing. In fact, they predated President Trump in attacking universities. So we can't attract that talent. And this investment right now would have paid dividends 8-9 years later. That is the first example that we have missed the boat. Similarly, in terms of economic policy, we spoke about the fact that we are trying to create a new economic deal for the world. This is something, for example, people like you, people like Professor Kaushik Basu, people like Professor Arvind Subramaniam, people like Professor Raghuram Rajan. Each of these people who are actually, for that matter, Professor Geeta Gopinath, they're first class minds. They are not just feted in India, they're feted globally as people who can actually shape and give a truly visionary a vision for the world, not just India. What is the Modi government doing with them? I'm quoting Prime Minister Modi. He said, "We don't appreciate Harvard, we appreciate hard work." He vilified, caricature anyone who is abroad, any one of these thinking intellectuals. They have made concerted effort to throw everyone out, including Professor Urjit Patel and many others, just to give you an example. So my point is, these people could have worked with the government of India to create an alternative vision. Similarly, that vision could have been used by the MEA, which continues to have diplomats who are exceptional. Our diplomatic corps, however small it is, and it needs to be ramped up, trained much more, could have been used to sell this idea to South Africa, to the Africans. You know what China is doing in Africa? They have invested with Ghana into setting up the APPI. $46 billion they are investing in creating a coalition of African parties. They are trying to do the same thing in South America with Kuppal. Why couldn't India, who has natural relationships, thanks to Prime Minister Nehru, thanks to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, thanks to Rajiv Gandhi, thanks to Narasimha Rao, thanks to Manmohan Singh, thanks to even Atal Bihari Vajpayee, why could we not have capitalized on that rich legacy that we have to actually create a coalition of the willing to change the global world order? We haven't, because Prime Minister Modi, the BJP government, don't have a vision. Yes, you are saying that we are against the neoliberal economic order. Fine, we want to decolonize the world. Arey bhai sahab, if you want to decolonize the world, work with those people who want to create and make India number one in the world. Nah, you're not doing that. So we keep missing the boat thanks to their saffron politics.
So if we were to look at the era of globalization, it clearly, you can date it from 1991 onwards. And
in
especially,
India.
In not just India, but also with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the global economy became truly global after the Soviet bloc was dismantled. But if you now look at it from in after like 35 years, you can clearly say that the biggest beneficiaries of the globalization period are China and then India, in terms of nearly 1.2 billion people collectively coming out of poverty, etc. So if this particular global order before Trump, which Trump is trying to dismantle and destroy, has been so beneficial to India, why are you opposed to it?
That's again a very good question. I don't think it has been somewhat beneficial to India. It has created a big middle class, no doubt. But the fact of the matter is that we have opened up our economy as if we are markets, and it's fine as a middle power. For some time post the 90s, we have spent about 3 decades trying to benefit from as a back end of multinational conglomerates. That's perfectly all right, and we benefited. We created a middle class. We pulled a lot of Indians, 27 million under the UPA government, out of poverty. But it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work anymore because China, because of the fact that it is much more assertive, is willing to and it sees India as a threat and as an economic threat on its border. It has been actively working to shift manufacturing and pushing them into Vietnam, into Bangladesh, into Malaysia, and of course these countries are also proactive. India, to look at that Keynesian curve, which where you shift from agriculture to manufacturing and to services, we missed the manufacturing boat because we were the back end. Now the point is that it is high time we take time to invest in manufacturing. But the problem is it has come at an inflection point when AI, big tech, and other critical changes are happening. Now, if India has to project hard power, you need to have supply lines. Are we investing in Africa to get rare earths and elsewhere? We don't. We still have a large population stuck in agriculture. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. We still have large number of PSUs, which actually I continue to think are assets, and we have a large service sector. Now we need to work around these particular agendas. Now, for example, I'm thinking out of the box here. But for example, Central Asian republics and Africa does not have skilled agricultural labor or skilled agricultural technology. This is an export waiting to be put in. Israel did that, right? We were still not thinking about that. Similarly, PSUs, which in China it is called state-owned enterprises, SOEs. Why are we not leveraging PSUs to start achieving our strategic and foreign policy goals? Instead, we are myopically trying to privatize them, divest them. So you are trying to earn 10 rupees today. You're not understanding that if you continue to invest in them, use them for foreign policy, tomorrow you will earn 10,000 rupees. Just to give you a small example. Similarly, our services sector, it is now beginning. We are a big commodity consumer market, fair enough, but our consumption is about, let's say, it's about I think 54.5% of our economy, which is a very good thing. Our market is good enough to provide for ourselves. We are able to generate enough this thing, but we also need to think about the next 20 years. Eventually, population rates will start declining. Are we thinking about what kind of manufacturing we are going to have? We are not. And in this context, when similar tariffs are being imposed on us, which shut down the back offices for us, we're going to have to start thinking of alternatives. And this needs to be done not today, it needs to be done yesterday. What was this government doing for the last 11 years? You've not invested in R&D. You have not invested in public PSUs. You have not created a base for your MSMEs, which can absorb. And by the way, employment. Yeah. We have a huge population which is growing still now. We don't. If we invest in back-end offices and this high-end manufacturing, which come from abroad, you cannot absorb employment, especially with tech and AI. So you need to create an alternative model, which we are not thinking of. So my point is that given this, for our own national security, for our own economic security, we need to start thinking of a different model. And the neoliberal global order will only work for us for about 5 more years. But we need to start thinking beyond that.
So there are two major challenges going forward. One is that the demographic dividend is coming to an end pretty soon. Maybe India has 20 years at the most, right? After that, suddenly you will have perhaps the largest old population in the world. Exactly. You probably have more old people in India who are retired than, say, many countries in the world. Perhaps the retirees might be the biggest country on earth just in India within 20-25 years, which means a huge burden on the state. But what is also interesting is that a lot of India's, when I look at India's unemployment and employment data, it's very scary. India is the only country, for example, where the only country in the world where you can be unpaid but employed.
Yeah.
This is something very bizarre to me. How can you be employed and you're not paying taxes? Forget about that. You are not even earning anything. On top of that, what has happened in the last, especially since COVID, is that people, this logic of you go from the farm to the factory, then you go to the office, right? Now, what has happened after COVID is people have gone back to the farm. So you have actually created more jobs in the agricultural sector. And because India is taking these people who are unpaid as employed, that's why it looks as if the agricultural sector is increasing. But what's basically happening is this guy is sitting at home and watching TV, or is on his iPhone watching reels, and is considered employed because his father asked him to go and get something in the morning on the bike. That's all, right? So those are some very serious stuff. And I was looking at, and this is a global problem, not just for India. For example, in India, the more educated you are, the less likely you are to get a job right now. For example, the unemployment rate for people who have not cleared high school is just 5%, and those who have college degrees is 15%. And apparently in China, it has now gone up to 21% youth unemployment. So I think there are a lot of problems, but there's so much of a culture of hype in India now. Everything is hype. And there's so much of hype building about, like, as if tomorrow China is going to collapse and day after tomorrow America is going to be finished and India is going to be the richest and the most powerful country by end of the weekend. That seems to be the mood among a lot of people in India. As a result of that, there is no serious discussion on these critical issues going forward. Is that an issue that we need to worry about, that we can't have a serious dialogue about where India is and where India is going?
Absolutely. I think this is a huge problem right now. And you've actually hit the nail on the head, because the thing is that our demographic dividend is becoming a demographic time bomb. And this is a problem that we are not sufficiently seized about, especially this government. MSMEs are the way forward to absorb this particular large economic workforce, but it's a temporary measure. They can perhaps give you a 10-15 year absorption capacity, but you're going to have to start thinking of out of the box solutions to actually address this particular structural, and it's a structural problem that has started from 2012. It's not even this government's problem. It's something that is that predates this government. But the problem with this particular government is that it's not even willing to have an honest conversation. You know, for a fact that they have been, the last time there was a data that was released by the labor force was in 2018, which, by the way, business standard was leaked in Business Standard. They were asked to pull it out. And after that, they have not put out data. The government basically obfuscates data, whether every statistic is obfuscated, and if they release data, they change the baseline years to sort of look at it from the worst possible thing in 2013, 2014. Now, this is not the way you govern a country. If you are a genuine patriot, if you're genuinely interested in India's economic and social and political security, you need to be asking yourselves tough questions which might make you uncomfortable. And then you need to sit down with people who say, you know what, you've tried this, it doesn't work, let's try this. You need to have those conversations, because see, no one is perfect. Not this government, not the Congress government. There are things that you need to experiment with to make sure that your population, you're a government of, for, and by the people. Here you're a government of, for, and by yourself. So the entire focus of the BJP government is actually narrowly focused on ensuring they remain in power, to pad up their numbers, to project the prime minister, to ensure that the data is not unfavorable. This is their whole exercise. They spend more money on propaganda and PR and proselytizing their message than actual welfare schemes. They're spending more money on talking to people than listening to people, and including experts such as yourself and other people. This is not sustainable. I'm sorry, this is not sustainable. And it is not sustainable at a time when the world is undergoing such major economic political shifts. You need to, in the national interest, sit down, have a hard rethink about current economic, social, political paradigms, and think about a way and forge a new way for the next 20 years. And this requires, mind you, a bipartisan consensus. This is another thing that the government is not doing. This government, if you see its bench strength, and keep aside the shaft, keep aside the propaganda, major problems in the railway sector, major problems in the transport sector. The transport minister, you know how they keep talking about these big highways. Do you know how they have enhanced the rate of construction highways? Earlier, the rate was calculated in terms of length. You know what they have changed? They have firstly change the existing state highways, redesignate them as state highways. So you've suddenly mushroomed it as double. Secondly, rather than counting it as the length, you're counting it in the horizontally. So instead of, so I mean, this is not the way you government. And if you see the rate, they've actually slowed down almost half from what was happening before 2014. This kind of stuff, you can't, they don't have a proper bench strength. Their ministers are nincompoops. Everything is being controlled by, I'm sorry to say this. I mean, genuinely, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be insulting, but everything is being controlled by a few select people from Gujarat in the prime minister's office. Ministers are like secretaries. So this is not the way you run a country as large. It is a continent-sized country. It is bigger than Europe. You need serious people to solve.
We are bigger than Africa in terms of the
exactly. Yeah. You need serious people who are focused on the substantive, not on the symbolic. And this government is completely focused on the substantive, on the symbolic. This is the problem. And you need, as I said, look at the opposition. You have people who have spent decades in government. They know what is going on. Use their institutional memory. You're not doing that.
You know, talking about the transportation minister, I heard Mr. Gadkari, his name is, he was bragging about how the Prince of Dubai wanted him to, to basically go on deputation for 6 months to improve the roads of Dubai compared to what he has done in India. Yes, so there is a lot of hype. You know, there is something new that is happening, and I want to hear about you. For example, in the last 2 weeks, the MAGA crowd here in the United States has really gone after Vivek Ramaswamy and now J.D. Vance because of their Hindu background and Hindu wives. So there is an upsurge of anti-India sentiment across the world that you can see, especially in the manner in which people are talking about restricting visas, migration. India needs about a crore jobs every year, 1 crore new jobs,
2
2 crores,
crore.
you're saying. So one way in which India was able to deal with this is by simply exporting people, sending them abroad.
Mm.
So you have the world's biggest diaspora, partly because you are sending your best and the brightest abroad, at least the second best and the brightest, I guess. You're sending abroad, the brightest are staying back, hopefully. Now, if this whole anti-immigration stuff also translates into people not, getting H1 visas, not just in the US, but in UK as well as Australia. When Starmer came to India, the whole idea was, look, I don't even want your students. I'll bring my universities here and take your money. And so do you think that this global backlash against migration, broadly speaking, which will impact India more than others, is going to exacerbate India's economic problems and job creation?
No, I don't think so. And see, again, the government would argue that it does. I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. Um, Firstly, I want to, without circumscribing the legitimate fears that many Indian students or Indian NRIs or diaspora and businessmen feel. I'm not undermining or circumscribing that, but I'm trying to, this is what progressives need to do. We need to put ourselves in other shoes to understand what is happening. This is a global shift that is happening for almost till the 1800s. Still, we were colonized and China was colonized. China and India accounted for about 50% of the global GDP. India accounted for about 23%. The only way the West changed that was through force of arms, right?
Yes.
Now that we don't have a level playing field, but now that primordial rules of statecraft, primarily colonialism, are no longer politically correct. And I'm not saying that the neoliberal global order is provides a level playing field, but we are sort of coming back to where we were. In the next 2 decades, India and China will come back to their natural
Yes.
position. So that is inevitable. And the fact of the matter is, Indian diaspora, wherever they are, happen to be the richest, most well integrated, civilized people with deep cultural rootedness that exists in any country, that wherever they exist. This is bound to create insecurities among local populations. You are going to resent people who are doing better than you, who are able to capitalize on, in your case, the American dream, to get
Yeah.
ahead of themselves. This is going to create social insecurities and anxieties, which is now they're putting pressure on their political parties, whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats, their Labour parties or the Tories in the UK. It's inevitable. But the fact of the matter is, there is a failure of leadership in those parties. They are not able to provide. They are not able to provide an alternative political economic vision to provide for their quote unquote local indigenous populations, and are in fact weaponizing those insecurities against the Indian diaspora. So this is happening across the board. But there, having said this, I want to add a caveat. The BJP government has not done us any favors also,
Yeah.
because of the fact because of the fact that they weaponize the Indian diaspora to
Yeah.
work exclusively with the populist rights, whether they campaigned for the Republicans in the US, Howdy Modi and so on and so forth. They campaigned Operation Go Dharmik in the UK. They campaigned for 48 Tory MPs candidates. I think out of that 36 won. They did the same thing in the Netherlands with Gear Builders. They did the same thing in France. They did the same thing in Germany and AFD.
Canada.
They say
Canada
they
too.
tried to do the same thing in Trinidad and Tobago,
Yeah.
right? So at the Leicester riots, the leaked Daily Mail report said the fact that the BJP in India was fomenting those riots in the UK, in Leicester. So my point is, the BJP has actually painted a target on the diaspora's back, which was anyway happening because there were such insecurities. Now the point is that now the diaspora, the progressive parties are saying that, what, why should we work with the diaspora here? They are, of course, doing this in a black and white manner. All of you guys are with Modi, so let's just not work with you. This is a problem that we have created. And when I say we, I mean the BJP government. So this diaspora population is going to show a way to the West on what it means to be truly cosmopolitan, because that is how the Indian way has been. Because we have been a melting pot of cultures, we have had centuries of experience of actually living together. We should be, the progressive parties and the those parties there, the governments there, should be working with us in actually trying to find better ways, and we are actually poised very well to do that. And India actually can instead of benefiting from their largest, we can actually start supporting them. So there is a lot of opportunities for us to capitalize on and exploit. But again, it comes down to policy, vision, strategic. We need to start thinking about the future.
But
Are
Pushparaj,
we thinking? Sorry, so Professor Khan, are we really thinking about these questions?
no, we are not. That's the thing. That's people, when you ask these questions, it gets very nasty. I was on a centrist show, and they were talking about hatred towards immigrants, and I deliberately said, yeah, but we must also not forget कि यहाँ पर 7 लाख घुसपैठिया है, वो भी from Gujarat. In this Amrit Kal, we have about 700,000 Indians who are undocumented in the United States. And most of them come from Gujarat, Haryana, and Punjab. These are the 3 states which provide the largest number of it. But the reason why I wanted to be a bit provocative on that is because India is doing the same thing at home. I mean, this whole Bihar election thing, to talk about having an SIR, because apparently there are crores and crores of Muslims who have illegally migrated into India from Bangladesh and Pakistan. If you remember Amit Shah's speech about 25% growth of Muslims, and therefore an attempt to disenfranchise people who don't vote for BJP. The same thing is happening abroad now to Indians, right? That even legal Indians who are citizens are being targeted by the same right-wing movements. So what moral standing would India have to combat this on ethical grounds if it is doing the same thing at home while fighting that abroad?
That's a very valid question. That is a very valid question. And in fact, what you said, let's ask the obvious questions. If you think that when the Home Minister Amit Shah and Prime Minister Modi say that Ghuspetiya, the illegal immigration is happening, you've been in government for the last 11 years, right? Since 1998, you have been in government for the last 16 years, right? So the point is, you are to blame if you actually feel that immigration has increased. It's not us. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, this is complete hogwash. They're doing this simply to whip up anti-Muslim, anti-minority sentiments for their narrow domestic politics. That's it. And you're right. There is no moral. They don't have any local standard to say this. And the other thing, the other big question which you should asking is, as you rightly pointed out, there are illegal there is distress economic migration from India, from Haryana, Gujarat, and other places to Canada, to US. Why is that happening if there is actually Amrit Kal? If there is genuinely so much prosperity because that the BJP government has created in the last 11, what is happening? And the third part is, I mean, I don't want to completely blame the BJP government, but a lot of economic and political distress migration is also happening because of the way the West has been behaving in Africa and West Asia. You bomb people left, right, and center. You start wars, and when they come to your shores, you're like, "Why have you come here?" So it's not an easy question. It's a very complex structural systematic problem. We, at the very least, that we can do here in India is recognize that, boss, we have not been able to provide for all equitably. We need to do more to ensure that there is no distress migration out of India. That is one thing. And the second thing is, we need to win the confidence of all parties across the world, whether they are conservatives or progressive, and we should have a bipartisan approach, an Indian approach. And when Dr. Jaishankar wrote this book, The India Way actually should be to reach out to the Republicans and the Democratic Party in the US and say, you know what? We will work with both of you to ensure that our diaspora populations can serve your bipartisan goals. And we are able to do that. We are the richest diaspora population in the US. We can do that in the UK, but we don't have a bipartisan approach. What is stopping Prime Minister Modi to take Rahul Gandhi and as a leader of opposition, as the sitting de facto prime minister in waiting, and both of them talking to both these government both these party heads and saying, you know what, our diaspora population is huge, we can help you in making sure that the US or the UK or France or whatever it is, Germany, are actually cosmopolitan, and we can show you a better way. Because you know what, that's what Prime Minister Nehru did. We can show you a middle path, and this is India's unique USP. We can show a better way to the world because we've had decades, centuries of such experience. Instead of that, what are we doing? We're doing Howdy Modi. This symbolism is not going to work anymore.
Ironically, now there are, we call it the Samosa caucus. There are 6 Indian Americans in the Congress. They are all Democrats. None of them is from the Republican Party. And the only party that Indian government right now reaches out to is the Republican Party. It is so strange that Indians who are doing well in the political sphere are from the progressive side. I mean, Ro Khanna is like, I've become a big fan of Ro Khanna in the last couple of years. He's really pushing the progressive issues on economic as well as foreign policy issues. And most of them, except for the guy from Michigan, the rest of them are all quite aggressively progressive. But I want to return to the discussion on the global issues. One thing that we notice is that there is the clear decline in democracy worldwide, the democratic recession. We see that even countries which are democratic have become less democratic, and there are fewer democracies in the world. And where there are no right-wing governments, if you exclude the US, Hungary, India, in the other democrats, you have centrists like Macron and Starmer. So I can't think right now off the top of my mind where there is a progressive government in place where progressive values can be showcased. There aren't many big names who can, become global visionary leaders. So the conference that you had in April in Hyderabad, can events like that really not only revitalize the progressive vision in India, but also become a convening force for the rest of the world?
That's the plan. That is our plan, and we are working towards that. And to his credit, leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi has been actually thinking about what we need to do to move ahead, because there is a vacuum in progressives globally. You're right. Bland mediocrities are passing off as progressive. You can't be asking for equity with regard to Ukraine and then be silent on Palestine. No, absolutely not. And I must be very clear. I don't want this to be caricatured. We absolutely support the two-state solution. No doubt about it. Both peoples have a right to exist, and both nations have a right to exist. But to bomb them the way they have been doing and using the Hamas as an excuse to do that is absolutely wrong. And we need to be standing up for what is right. So my point is, there is a vacuum in progressive politics. There is a vacuum of progressive leadership. Progressives were the ones who were cool at one point. We were the ones who made politics sexy. We were the ones who built big tent umbrellas, coalitions, and we were the ones who occupied the center, left of center, right of center, whatever it is. But we occupied the center. Today, progressive parties are split between the they're either going far left or they're going far right. They are abandoning the center. And they are doing this because they don't know how to respond to the right. And please understand that what Rahul Gandhi is trying to do, what the Bharat Summit is trying to do, is to build a coalition because, to quote Bill Clinton or misquote Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton, he said, "Is the economy stupid?" Yeah. It is the economy, because understand, when the nation and when the economy does not work for you, you turn towards traditional norms of social cohesion. What does that do? You get pushed into religion, you get pushed into caste, you get pushed into patriarchy, and so on and so forth. And these are the fault lines that the right weaponizes. So you want to provide a fair economic deal. You want to make politics sexy. For that, you need to have a vision and you need to build a broad coalition, not just within India, but also within the globally. That is why in India, we built the India coalition, a 28-party coalition. And globally, we are trying to build together. We had 107 parties at the Bharat Summit. Next time, we'll take it to 140 parties. We need to sit together and flesh out these ideas so that we domestically and globally are able to pose a vision that inspires the silent majority. Because trust me on this one, the silent majority is willing and waiting to give you a chance. They are not able to give you a chance is because you are becoming a pale shadow of the alt-right, a populist autocrat. They don't want to vote for the photocopy, na? You'll vote for the original. So you can't outpunch the right. See, this is what I keep saying. You can't out Trump. We can't out Modi. You can't out reform or out Farage. You can't out AFD. You can't do this. You need to have your vision and stand on principle that here we stand. If you don't like this, don't vote for us. And trust me, I know for a fact that the silent majority is waiting to hear this. They will vote for us. At least Rahul Gandhi started doing that.
I was talking to a very prominent Egyptian philosopher called Hassan Hanafi, and he told me something very interesting. He says, Muqtedar, when I go into my class, there are 100 people in the class. 20 of them are Islamists. They want this Islamic revolution. 10% of them are communists. So these guys want the green revolution. These guys want the red revolution. But the 70 in the middle, they're waiting for a third discourse, which is not there. So that's the vacuum, right? Where you see that in Mamdani's campaign. I mean, he's been targeted so aggressively from both the right as well as the center. I mean, Democrats as well as the Republicans have been hitting at him, but he's like an inexorable force that is moving forward, and that tells you that there is a desire among the people from the way the world is changing, because globalization is definitely fantastic, but only for a few people. and a large number of people are essentially losers in this system. So I will share your article, a link to your article in the Hindu. It was very thought-provoking, and it obviously generates very critical dialogues about important issues, about domestic politics, as well as essentially international relations. So Pushparaj Deshpande, thank you for being on Khanversations. And I think this is just the beginning of a dialogue. So I will be coming back to you again and again to push this agenda forward. So thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Professor Khan. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.